In 1997, Hollywood attempted to incinerate audiences not once, but twice with lava. That year, in an odd case of cinematic synchronicity or good old-fashioned studio competition, two major film studios released big-budget disaster movies focused on volcanic eruptions. Within just 3 months of each other, Universal Pictures unleashed Dante's Peak, and 20th Century Fox fired back with Volcano. Neither movie rewrote the record books at the box office, but together, they gave birth to one of the strangest and most entertaining rivalries in disaster movie history. It wasn't so much a head-to-head battle for realism or even quality, but rather a clash of tones, settings, and how much lava a movie could throw at its viewers without completely melting the plot. To understand how we ended up with two Volcano movies in 1 year, it helps to look at the cinematic landscape of the mid-1990s. It was a golden age for the resurgence of the disaster genre, with the help of rapidly improving digital effects and the ever-growing appetite for summer spectacles. Audiences had flocked to Jurassic Park in 1993 to see dinosaurs brought to life, cheered for Twister in 1996 as flying cows and airborne debris became box office gold, and celebrated the pyrotechnic mayhem of Independence Day. Hollywood smelled blood, or perhaps ash, and was on the hunt for the next natural catastrophe that could be rendered in CGI and churned into a crowd-pleasing thrill ride. By 1996, production pipelines were full of apocalyptic concepts, and somewhere between development meetings and studio lunches, two different teams settled on the same fiery idea: Volcanoes. The first to reach screens was Dante's Peak, which erupted on February 7, 1997. Directed by Roger Donaldson, who had previously helmed Species and would later direct 13 Days, the film drew loose inspiration from real-life events like the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. It leaned heavily into scientific consultation and grounded disaster imagery. Set in a quiet, picturesque town nestled at the base of a long-dormant volcano, the film followed Pierce Brosnan as Harry Dalton, a volcanologist with a tragic backstory and an eye for geological anomalies. When he arrives in the fictional town of Dante's Peak, he quickly notices signs that the mountain is waking up. He warns the town's officials, including Mayor Rachel Wando, played by Linda Hamilton, that they may be sitting on a ticking time bomb. Naturally, the town doesn't listen, at least not at first. What follows is a race against time as Dalton and Wando must save her children, navigate crumbling roads, acidic lakes, and ash-filled skies, all while trying to outrun the deadly forces of nature. There's even a scene where a truck literally drives over lava. It was a classic 90s disaster movie in structure, but made attempts at suspense and realism, and featured practical effects alongside its digital flourishes. Universal clearly wanted audiences to take it seriously, even if the science was occasionally laughable. Just over 2 months later, on April 25, 1997, Volcano exploded into theaters with a completely different approach. This time, the action wasn't tucked away in a sleepy mountain town. It was downtown Los Angeles, one of the busiest urban centers in the world, and now, somehow, the epicenter of an underground volcanic eruption. Directed by Mick Jackson, known for The Bodyguard and the harrowing BBC nuclear war film Threads, Volcano offered less buildup and more immediate chaos. Tommy Lee Jones played Mike Rourke, the determined director of LA's Office of Emergency Management. When unexplained earthquakes begin shaking the city and the Brea Tar Pits start bubbling ominously, Rourke teams up with geologist Dr. Amy Barnes, played by Anne Hesh, to investigate. The answer, it turns out, is lava, lots of it. A previously unknown volcanic vent beneath the city has opened, and magma is making its way through storm drains, subway tunnels, and city streets. What ensues is a non-stop, fast-paced disaster movie that asks, how do you stop lava from destroying Los Angeles? According to Volcano, the answer is pour concrete, build walls, blow up buildings, spray water, and hope Tommy Lee Jones can solve the problem by sheer force of will. So, there they were, two films about volcanoes, released in the same year, featuring vastly different tones, settings, and approaches to disaster. One film was a grounded, forest-shrouded thriller with a scientist hero and emotional stakes. The other was a hyper-urban, action-heavy spectacle about lava-melting subway cars and monuments. Dante's Peak tried to scare you with the slow inevitability of nature's fury. Volcano tried to thrill you with lava bombs and crumbling skyscrapers. Where one whispered, the other shouted. Where one aimed for plausible science, the other gleefully disregarded it. Two Volcanoes, two very different disaster movies, released just weeks apart, both trying to out-erupt the other in the middle of a Hollywood obsessed with spectacle. The great lava showdown of 1997 was on. Dante's Peak takes a more deliberate and methodical approach, channeling the spirit of a Spielberg-style thriller that gradually builds suspense rather than rushing into spectacle. The film begins with a sense of foreboding and unease, layering in subtle hints of geological instability while focusing on character dynamics and local politics. The tension is palpable as Pierce Brosnan's volcanologist character tries to convince the town's leadership that the dormant volcano looming above them might not be as dormant as everyone thinks. But his warnings are met with skepticism and bureaucratic hesitation, a classic disaster movie setup that echoes the tension of Jaws or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The volcano itself remains largely quiet for most of the first hour, its eventual eruption teased through minor tremors, scalding hot springs, and ominous signs in nature. When it finally blows, the eruption is sudden, catastrophic, and executed with operatic flair. Enormous pyroclastic flows barrel down the mountain, boiling acid eats through everything in its path, and a thunderous mudslide tears the once quaint town apart. It's a hellish spectacle, but one that's earned through a careful, suspense-driven buildup. Volcano, by contrast, is the cinematic equivalent of throwing gasoline on a fire and then adding more gasoline just because. The film opens at a brisk pace and never slows down for breath. Within the first half hour, Los Angeles is already under siege by magma bubbling up from deep underground, and the film makes no effort to hold back on the destruction. There's no time for simmering suspense or subtle scientific clues here. Everything is exploding, burning, or collapsing. The chaos is relentless. Lava bombs shoot out of the ground like artillery shells, manholes erupt in flames, and an entire subway system becomes a river of molten rock. In one especially absurd moment, Tommy Lee Jones tries to outmaneuver the disaster using little more than construction equipment, city infrastructure, and a blanket in a sequence that manages to be both completely ridiculous and strangely entertaining. The tone is far more frantic and unhinged than Dante's Peak, embracing the absurdity of its premise with reckless abandon. It's not about realism or character development. It's about lava tearing through downtown Los Angeles while the soundtrack blares and the camera shakes. Both films embrace classic disaster movie formulas, recycling familiar elements like the underestimated expert warning of danger, the indifferent or profit-driven officials who ignore them, and the inevitable race against time once disaster strikes. Noble sacrifices, desperate escapes, and high-stakes rescues are all present and accounted for. But where Dante's Peak leans into human drama and the slow boil of impending doom, Volcano charges full throttle into bombastic, over-the-top spectacle without ever hitting the brakes. In terms of casting and character dynamics, Dante's Peak scores points for bringing in Pierce Brosnan at the height of his James Bond-era popularity. As Harry Dalton, Brosnan plays a capable and composed scientist haunted by personal tragedy, a man who knows the cost of not acting quickly enough in the face of natural disaster. His performance adds a touch of gravitas and quiet intensity to the proceedings. Opposite him, Linda Hamilton brings emotional weight and strength to the role of Mayor Rachel Wando. Still known to audiences for her iconic portrayal of Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, Hamilton adds an earthy realism and resilience to her character. Together, Brosnan and Hamilton have a believable chemistry that helps ground the more absurd moments of the film. Even when saddled with cheesy dialogue, such as the now infamous line, "Acid eats metal," they manage to sell the scene with a straight face and just enough sincerity to keep the film from veering into camp. Over in Volcano, Tommy Lee Jones storms through the movie like a man who took a wrong turn on the way to a courtroom drama. His character, Mike Rourke, is a no-nonsense emergency management director who seems personally offended by the existence of lava. Jones brings his usual gravitas and gruff authority, but the role gives him little beyond shouting commands, scowling at city officials, and risking his life for his daughter. The script never bothers to explore him as a character beyond those surface traits. Anne Hesh plays Dr. Amy Barnes, a geologist who serves as Rourke's scientific counterpart, but her role is thinly written and mainly functions to explain plot developments or act as a mouthpiece for exposition. Despite this, Hesh brings some energy and wit to the part, and she and Jones bounce off each other well enough to keep things watchable. What Volcano lacks in central character depth, it tries to make up for with a stacked supporting cast. Don Cheadle, playing Rourke's right-hand man, is effortlessly charismatic and provides some much-needed levity. John Carroll Lynch, meanwhile, delivers one of the film's most memorable scenes, in which his character sacrifices himself in a surreal act of lava-dodging heroism that is both unintentionally hilarious and strangely poignant. While most of the supporting roles are underwritten, the actors bring enough personality to leave a lasting impression, even if the plot never gives them much to do beyond reacting to fire and yelling, "Go, go, go!" Neither Dante's Peak nor Volcano ignited the box office in any meaningful way. Despite the high expectations and blockbuster ambitions of both studios, the financial returns landed somewhere between mild tremor and minor aftershock. Dante's Peak, with its considerable production budget of $116 million, managed to pull in around $178 million worldwide. That might sound like a respectable number on paper, but factoring in marketing costs, distribution cuts, and expectations for a true blockbuster return, it's clear the film barely broke even. It wasn't an outright disaster, but it certainly didn't erupt into the box office hit Universal had hoped for. Volcano, on the other hand, came in slightly cheaper, with a reported budget of $90 million, yet its total worldwide gross stalled at around $123 million. That figure, while not catastrophic, was underwhelming enough to cool any franchise ambitions. In a year loaded with competition and natural disaster films, both entries came and went with less impact than their respective eruptions. Critical response didn't do either film any favors. Dante's Peak received a surprisingly harsh reception from reviewers, landing a dismal 28% score on Rotten Tomatoes. The critics took aim at its thin characters, melodramatic tone, and tendency to lean heavily on disaster movie cliches. While some praised the film's use of practical effects and its attempt at grounding the narrative in real-world volcanology, most found it uninspired. Volcano fared slightly better, earning a 50% rating, a lukewarm consensus that still fell short of positive territory. Reviewers called out its implausible science, one-note characters, and its overall air of contrivance. Both films were labeled formulaic and clunky, packed with stiff dialogue and plot devices that strained credibility even by disaster movie standards. But here's where things take an unexpected turn. Despite the lackluster financial and critical response, the audiences didn't let these movies sink into obscurity. Over time, both films found second lives outside the multiplex. Dante's Peak, in particular, gained traction through cable reruns, home video sales, and streaming platforms. Viewers came to appreciate its sincerity, practical destruction sequences, an old-school approach to slow-building tension. It became a reliable late-night staple, the kind of film you half-watch while folding laundry but end up sitting through again anyway. The mountain, the mudslides, the green pickup with the lava-proof tires, it all became oddly iconic. Meanwhile, Volcano took a different path. Laughed off by critics but embraced by a niche of disaster movie fans, it developed a cult following based almost entirely on its sheer absurdity. It's a film that, by all accounts, should not work. And yet, in all its over-the-top madness, it manages to entertain. The scene where a transit worker melts in lava after a heroic attempt to save a colleague became something of a cult classic moment. A clip that gets passed around social media and meme threads for its sheer audacity. It's a so-bad-it's-good gem, the kind of movie you watch with friends to heckle, not admire. When it comes to scientific credibility, there's no real contest. If we're awarding points for realism, Dante's Peak takes the win by a landslide. No pun spared. In fact, the U.S. Geological Survey gave the film a surprising nod of approval. While it certainly took liberties with some scenes, like acid lakes, lava-resistant pickup trucks, and conveniently timed volcanic eruptions, the basic structure of the disaster scenario and the way it portrayed early warning signs, governmental hesitance, and the human cost of ignoring natural threats hit closer to real-world volcanology than many might expect. It wasn't perfect, but at least it made an effort to base its spectacle in semi-grounded science. Volcano, on the other hand, wasn't even trying. The premise alone, a full-blown volcano spontaneously forming under Los Angeles, is geologically laughable. The film features lava flowing uphill, explosions launching lava bombs through manhole covers, and magma navigating the LA metro like it's following a route map. Even the film's science advisor admitted to holding his tongue during production, choosing spectacle over accuracy. The filmmakers weren't interested in realism. They were aiming for big, loud, and outrageous. Yet therein lies the paradox. Despite, or maybe because of, its complete disregard for scientific plausibility, some viewers actually prefer Volcano. It doesn't try to be educational or emotionally profound. It just wants to show you lava melting downtown LA. It's big, dumb fun, and it embraces that identity fully. In that way, Volcano mirrors the very city it's trying to destroy. Sprawling, chaotic, a little ridiculous, but undeniably entertaining, like LA traffic with lava. Here's the thing, neither of these movies is perfect. In fact, both are riddled with flaws, leaning heavily on well-worn disaster movie tropes and the unmistakable hallmarks of late 1990s Hollywood. They're over-the-top, loud, packed with melodrama, and about as subtle as a lava bomb. But despite their shared shortcomings, one of them has managed to hold up better over time. That movie is Dante's Peak. While its plot is formulaic and its dialogue sometimes unintentionally hilarious, there's a sincerity to its execution that's aged surprisingly well. The use of practical effects, especially in an era where studios were still figuring out CGI, helps ground the chaos in something that still looks tangible today. There are sequences that, even now, carry real tension. The acid lake scene, with the grandma sacrificing herself so the others can survive, is infamous in disaster film circles. And of course, no one who's seen it can forget the absurdly indestructible 1987 Chevrolet V30 Custom Deluxe Crew Cab chugging its way over lava flows like it's made out of mythological fireproof steel. On the other hand, Volcano is remembered for being absolutely bonkers in the best and worst ways. It doesn't even try to be realistic. It just throws itself headfirst into the absurd. There's a volcano erupting in the middle of Los Angeles, lava pouring through subway tunnels, and people making life or death decisions in traffic. It's chaotic, cartoonish, and makes little sense from a scientific perspective. But that doesn't stop it from being entertaining. In fact, for many people, that's part of the appeal. Volcano is the kind of film that you watch when you want to turn your brain off and enjoy the spectacle. It's pure popcorn cinema, the kind that pairs well with a rainy afternoon and zero expectations. That said, the movie is also a jumble of underdeveloped plot lines, awkward attempts at social commentary, and some of the clunkiest dialogue of the decade. The final message, suggesting that racial tensions in Los Angeles can be resolved simply because everyone is covered in ash, is unintentionally comedic in its naivety. In terms of pure movie quality, Dante's Peak edges out its fiery rival. It tells a tighter story, has more grounded characters, and manages to squeeze out some genuine suspense and emotional investment. It's the more competent, more coherent of the two. But if you're looking specifically for a movie about a volcano doing crazy things, then Volcano arguably delivers more bang for your buck. It goes bigger, louder, and dumber, and it knows exactly what it is. So, which film leaves a greater impact? It depends on what you're in the mood for. If you want a disaster movie with a bit of build-up, a touch of character development, and an effort to make things feel plausible, then Dante's Peak is the clear choice. If you want fiery chaos from start to finish, where logic is optional and the goal is to throw lava at as many buildings as possible, Volcano might just be the better ride. In the end, when the Great Volcano Showdown of 1997 settled, it wasn't a blowout victory for either side. Both films carved out their own cult followings. Both became nostalgic artifacts of an era obsessed with cinematic cataclysms. And both, in their own flawed and fiery way, continue to entertain. So really, we all won, unless, of course, we were fictional residents of Dante's Peak or downtown Los Angeles. In that case, we were definitely toast.
Joy will bring. Tune into the beat, feel the magic, it's true. Channel 199X, we're here just for you, for you.